Welcome to Truth Talk Live.
All right, let's talk.
The truth is, I can't hide it, I can't hold it anymore.
A daily program powered by the Truth Network.
This is kind of a great thing, and I'll tell you why.
Where pop culture, current events, and theology all come together.
Speak
Your mind.
And now, here's today's Truth Talk Live host.
It is May 15th. In 2026, which if you happen to hang out with Dr. The Word Carson, as I do, that means a lot of things. It means, fascinatingly, it is actually really 50 days till we celebrate our 250th anniversary. And Franklin Graham is calling for 50 days of prayer. And there's a big event coming up this Sunday on the 17th in Washington, D.C., and so all these things are happening around our country. And so as we think about, just frame that in our minds, is America called to be a Christian nation? Or are Christians called to make America look like Christ? Or framed as perhaps President Kennedy might have said it, ask not how America can become more Christian, but ask how can I make America look more like Christ. And when you look at that in your own life, like practically, and this is a question we always love your calls, for you to consider and pray about, like, practically speaking, how do you make the rubber meet the road there, as the Christian car guys would say? Like, how do you do that? What are some practical steps? Clearly, I couldn't agree more with Franklin that what an opportunity we do have 50 days here to pray, because we were born for such a time as this, right? Here we are. We're this generation. We're coming in to celebrate this, and we have an opportunity, as they did, right, to, like our verse of the week, our verse of the day says, Doc, right, that we're not supposed to put our light under a bushel.
You're talking about Matthew 5:15. Exactly. We're supposed to be lights, and when we think about some of the great verses that made America, Matthew 5:14, Matthew 5:15, we're supposed to be a city set upon a hillside that is a light to the whole world. And this 250th celebration of the Declaration of Independence, it's our birthday. It's not the day of the Constitution. It's the day of the Declaration of Independence. That's how we mark our birthday as a country. And to think that it's always been about how can we be a light to the world. Well, one of the great rededications that need to be taking place this year is that we're not going to put our light under a bushel. We're not going to do that. We're going to pull that light out, put it on a lampstand so the whole world can see it.
Yeah, I love it. And so I love that this can be done so practically, obviously practically through prayer. But even today, Doc, I happen to know there was a waitress. and, like most waitresses that I ever met, they have birthdays, right? And since that their birthday is always an opportunity to interact with them, you can kind of put a little light in there, right? Well, tell us what happened. I love this story.
Well, today we were having lunch in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, where I find myself, and I was having lunch with a couple of former student leaders at Liberty alumni, and the waitress came, and right off the bat, I mean, she, soft toss on her arm. She had tattooed 614, 615, and 623. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, those are dates that must be significant. But she was like 18 years of age, so I'm like, these aren't the dates of her children. But immediately I started asking her, what are those numbers? And she said they're significant dates of people in her life. And I said, well, every one of those have a Bible verse. And then I asked her when her birthday was. And she told me 3:20, and there's Ephesians 3:20, that God will do exceedingly abundantly above anything you ask or think. And so, yes, whenever you're out eating, wherever you are. Ask a person when their birthday is, and that gives you a chance to share the Date the Word Bible verse for that date if you got the Date the Word app, and now you've started a spiritual conversation with them.
Right, but I love that. I love that she was completely honest with you, Doc. And what did she say when you said, I got a great Bible verse for you? What was her comment?
Well, yeah, she did say, I have not read a Bible. And I go, well, today we're going to give you something from the Bible I think you're going to find very enjoyable that will make you want to read your Bible. And she was very pleasant. She wasn't like, I don't want to hear this. She thanked me for giving her birthday verses. And I gave a verse for each one of those, 6:14, 6:15, and 6:23, which Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. And that's just one of the great verses of the Bible.
Oh, it's beautiful. And, so there's a question for you to call us. 866-348-7884 is the number to call in and share. How do you do this? How do you put your light up so that we can be, as an individual, a city on the hill, right? We as a country, a city on the hill. How is it that you shine that in any given situation? And fascinatingly, I had that very opportunity this morning early. Got a text from somebody who I know is struggling with their faith in a lot of ways. I don't believe they have come to Christ, but I don't know. But I do know that they had some serious concerns about what was going on in the country. And, it was an extremely depressing text. As I read 4 or 5 of them that came my way looking for some response, and it was just an opportunity. It was just an opportunity, right, that God had given me to say, hey, when you take a look at what happened after Adam and Eve fell, is Cain walked away from God, and after he killed his brother, he walked even further away from God. But however, he had a brother, Seth, and Seth made different choices. Thank goodness. And if it wasn't for Seth, it would be a completely different world. But he made different choices, and as a result, when you look at the lives of his family, is a significantly different situation. And so here we are, and I said this to this dear person. I said, here we are. We have choices. We can walk towards God, or we can walk away from God. But the consequences of walking away are just as horrific as what Cain faced, and always will. And so you have those conversations every single day. You ask God for the light. We get that. But I'm really curious because, we have so many wonderful listeners that are so close to the Lord. How can you help us with this question? How can we make that light shine? How can we make America more Christ-like in these 50 days leading up to such an event that in this very generation we get to live this out? And if you happen to be in Pennsylvania, Doc, it's almost like there's a keystone about it or something.
There's a keystone. That's it. That's the nickname. Virginia's the Old Dominion, and I've never really totally understood that. But the keystone I do understand, because a keystone holds things together. And the great people of Pennsylvania through the years are the ones who held America together. It was a great meeting place. They came to Philadelphia. It was a central location where people from Georgia, people from New York, New Hampshire, the 13 original colonies, they could meet in Philadelphia. That's where we get our Declaration of Independence. That's where we get our Constitution. And if you've never been to Independence Hall, one of the things I've been thinking, Robbie, what should I be doing as I celebrate the 250th birthday of America? And what I want to be doing is going to these historic places.
Right, and understanding what other people did so I can learn what I could do. 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. We're going to be right back with a whole lot more. How can you be that light on the hill? Call us. We want to hear. We'll be right back.
Truth Talk Live.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today, we are 50 days away from our birthday, our 250th birthday. How exciting is that? And so, as we talked about, ask not, right, how America can become more Christian, but ask, how can I make America more Christ-like? And so, if you're asking yourself that question, I sure am. How do I do that practically? What are some things I can do? And we would love, right, any idea that you have along these lines. It's just beautiful. 866, the number to call, 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. I love your calls, and I love so much what listeners have just happened today. Maybe it happened yesterday. Maybe it happened this week, and you just, God prepared this good work for you in advance, and there it was, right? It was just, it fell right in your lap. I saw something the other night that just astounded me, that I was with some friends, and another gentleman walked up that was struggling with his well. They hadn't had water for like 4 days, and this is out in the country where my church is, and the man's, and this was like 8 o'clock at night, and he had him describe what was going on with his well, which was like 275 feet down. I mean, it was deep. And that member of my church jumped up and he says, well, let's go look at it. And I know that, I mean, he went out there that night, you know, it just, I mean, practically just helping out somebody that really had a desperate need. Like, if you don't see Jesus in that, it was just gorgeous. And I just thought, man, you know, God prepared that opportunity for Brian to do that right that moment, and he is preparing opportunities for us in so many ways. And I'm like you, Doc. I love the history of you know, what happened 250 years ago. And I love even what you mentioned a little bit before we were talking about what we're going to do on the show today about Abraham and his liberty idea.
Oh, you're talking about Abraham Clark. You know, as we get closer, 50 days away, one of the things I just recommend is that get to know the signers. And years ago, I bought a book. It's just called The Signers. And Abraham Clark is from New Jersey, and he signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Years later, he's part of the House of Representatives, 1791 through 1794. And one of the initiatives he brought to the House of Representatives was, we need on every coin the word liberty. And if right there, wherever you're listening, if you look at a quarter, a nickel, a dime, a penny, you look at any coin, you're going to see the word liberty on it. Well, that came because of one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, Abraham Clark. And I just think each one of the signers had different stories that they brought to the table, and how, you know, some of them didn't survive the Revolutionary War. Some of them lost everything. Some of them went on to other great levels of influence. Thomas Jefferson obviously became president. But Abraham Clark, he's one of those guys I always look at. His influence carries on because he wanted to make sure everybody remembered what it was about as we were fighting for liberty. Right.
And, you know, that liberty that so many have died for in this country, that liberty to, you know, that obviously George Whitefield was kicked out of England, you know, because of his religious beliefs. He didn't have liberty in England. He came to America and helped them. You know, it's fascinating. He was significant in lighting the light of Christ that led to the liberty that we all receive today. And to some extent, you know, he was one of the first to fall, right? As he died from infections that he got from traveling here and there, trying to get the light out as much as he possibly could, right?
Oh, what a incredible man of God, but a patriot. George Whitfield, a great awakening. Robby, you've been to see this movie now. I went to see it, my wife and I. It is one of, I would say, in the next 50 days, every American should watch A Great Awakening.
Yeah, because there are things in there where you just can see the passion of the reality of this situation that we are now in. And again, I'm opening the telephone lines because we would love to hear things that you are thinking about in this season, in this 50 days that we have before us. One of the things that just stuck out of that movie so clearly to me was Whitfield's connection to, his early career as an actor, where he was familiar with this story where the Archbishop of Canterbury went to this actor and said, how is it that actors can captivate their audiences with something that's not real, while our priests and preachers can't captivate their congregations with something that is real?
No question. That's one of the great statements of the entire movie.
And that's just convicting that he had a passion, and it came from his own testimony in so many ways, and so does yours. It's so, in other words, when you're talking about your own story, about how God really did work in your life, nobody can argue with that. And he really did show up when you got crushed by that Jeep, or he really did show up when you were in that car accident. Whatever the situation may be, you're making something totally real that is real. And I love what you were telling me about Billy Sunday when he was preaching there, and your whole Jeopardy experience. You got to tell that story, Doc.
Well, the other day I just happened to be watching Jeopardy, and I do like to see if I can maybe get 3 of the questions right out of the, I don't know how many questions they ask in the whole show, but I like to see if I can get a couple. And anyway, there was a question about words. And so they give this scenario of Billy Sunday preaching in Boston with 65,000 people in attendance. And what would that be called? Well, I'm going, a revival. None of the 3 buzzed in. And finally, the Ken Jennings, the buzzer went off, and he said, a revival. And it's like, duh. But here are 3 people who didn't recognize that for Billy Sunday to be preaching the way he was, he had a way of conveying God's word with a lot of passion, a lot of fire. They didn't recognize that word was revival. And maybe that's why we're in trouble. We don't even realize what we need right now. We need a revival.
And I love what you said, that he broke a chair. He would get so.
Billy Sunday preached, whoo! He was animated. He didn't stand behind a pulpit stoic. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Jonathan Edwards preached sinners in the hands of an angry God behind a pulpit reading his message with his head down. But God used that to shape a nation. It woke a nation up to, you don't want to be found in the hands of an angry God. Prepare yourself to meet God. But Billy Sunday, he was a former baseball player, and he would take a chair and just bust that thing to make sure nobody was sleeping while he was preaching.
65,000 wide awake, a great awakening.
A great awakening.
866-348-7884. I'm expecting some some chair breakers to call in. 866-348-7884. We'll be right back with a whole lot more. Ask not, right?
Truth Talk Live.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today is May 15th, 2026, and we are 50 days from our 250th birthday, the 4th of July celebration. Amazing opportunity we have to be amongst this generation. And we're talking about, as we enter this season, as Franklin Graham challenged us to be in 50 days of prayer. But what are other ways that we can become that light? As we talked about, ask not how America can become more Christian, but ask how can I make America more Christ-like? And I would love your view on that. I would love to know your thoughts. We have Mike in Dayton. Truth Talk Live Mike, some people call him. I don't know. Truth Talk Mike.
Well, thanks for taking my call. I pondered the question for a half hour, and and I think we need to change us. We need to change our hearts, the people, us individuals. Give me an example. I was a Christian all my life, but when I was in my 40s, maybe 45, maybe even 55, who knows? God started changing my heart. I was an angry man. I was angry. I was angry at the world. I was angry at my boss. I was angry at the people that were driving around me. I wasn't a loving person, but God changed me. He made me by the word, by people like this shows. That's where we need to change. We need to change within. And then that way, when you go to Speedway to get your coffee, you're not an angry, grumpy old man coming in and get their coffee and saying, hey, I want to pay for this. No. You say, hey, how you doing today? You know what I mean? And hey, and have a smile on your face.
Yeah, or even if you're in the DMV line for an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's hard to be not angry.
I'm just being honest. That's tough. But what does that mean for that? If you ever wonder why those poor DMV people are so, looking like they've had a bad day, you can imagine they don't meet a lot of happy people after they've waited in that line or, didn't have an appointment or whatever, their situation is. It's hard, man. I'm not, my kids will tell you, Dad needs to practice what he preaches here, and I do need to. But I love what you're saying, and God is changing.
That's why, Robbie, I don't preach on patience. Because if I preach on patience and they want me to practice patience, I'm in trouble.
Well, yeah, it's a long obedience in the same direction, Mike. I am with you, and I am certainly grateful for because I've had a chance to hang out with you some, and I'm grateful for your witness in that way because, people see that and how does that come about? And you make it very obvious where it came about.
Yeah, it came about, through me changing me inside. And then it's amazing by you being just friendly person to people, just being friendly, how the conversation changes to God. You know what I mean? And it's easy. Oh my gosh! And the more you learn how to be friendly, which is not hard. It's hard. I'm still working on it. The devil wants me to say, it's, this guy didn't turn left or right because the arrow's up there, and my hand wants to go towards the horn, and I go, oh no, don't do that. You know what I mean?
I don't know if you've ever heard this, Mike, but years ago, when I was probably in the third or fourth year of the Christian Car Guy show, I did a contest for the ultimate Christian car guy accessory. Like, what would be the ultimate Christian accessory to put on your car that would reflect Christ? And it was a real elaborate thing. We had a vacation to Israel for the winter, right? That I got from Pilgrim Tours that donated it. And this thing went on for months, and all these people had these different ideas on what would be the ultimate Christian car accessory. And you know what the winner was? Doc, do you know?
But I don't.
It was beautiful, and I've been wanting to have it built ever since and never have perfected it, but it's the rebuke yourself horn.
The rebuke yourself horn. Woo!
When you hit it, Doc, it hits you with a Bible verse to say, cool your jets.
Through the radio. That would be awesome. I love it.
It's a great idea. We just gotta make it work. But, as you said that, Mike, that's an opportunity as you raise your hand to strike that horn to think, man, God, what are you doing in my heart? And like you said, he's the one that does that. But we got to make ourselves available through that prayer. I love what Franklin Graham said, that 50 days, we really, really seek his face. 2 Chronicles, Doc, it's all about that.
Chronicles 7:14. Yeah, and we come out of the 4th of July, we go right into 7:14, and so to me, that becomes one of our great catalyst days to carry forth into the next 250. If my people, not if somebody else, God says, if my people will humble themselves, seek my face, pray, turn from their wicked ways. I want my neighbor to turn from his wicked ways. No, what you said, Mike, we decide to turn from our wicked ways. And now I'm going to live righteous, and then I bring to my nation a righteous person. I help make my nation better because I'm a better person.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Can we start with our churches, sir? Preparing our hearts before we go to church in the morning, on Sunday,
and praying.
And pray and say, God, let your spirit be there. Pray for the pastor that he has a great sermon. Praise God.
Because it is going to be God that's going to give it to him. I assure you. But speaking of great sermons, Doc and Mike, as we were talking about this, Pastor Mark Quartz was pastor at Calvary for years and years. Amazing man of God, and he did a sermon on 2 Chronicles 7:14. I will never ever forget. And he just started out with something like this. He goes, the problem is not the non-Christians, because the non-Christians are acting exactly like non-Christians would act. Don't be as shocked. The problem is my people, who are called by my name, are the ones that are supposed to humble themselves, right? And exactly what you said, Mike. If you're going to humble yourself, you got to admit, I ain't got this figured out. I need some help. I desperately need your help. I need to be in this place of letting you lead me, God, and seeking your face to show me the direction to go and all those things. And it was such a sermon. I'll never forget that God was with him that day, and I could clearly see exactly the power of 2 Chronicles 7:14, as if my people were called by my name. And interestingly, back then, there weren't Christians. They weren't called by Christ's name, right? But so today we kind of got the double whammy. Right? Because if we're called Christians, that's his name.
Yeah. And
we need to live up to that name.
And then could you imagine if the whole congregation came in expecting a word from God. Just their hearts would be open and their smiles would be there. And I can see it in people's faces. I try to make a smile on people's faces, but then they're not always happy to be there. You know what I'm saying? So I hate to say it. You can see it. And I just would love to see people just change their heart. You know what I mean? And that would change America. That's my opinion.
We can be praying. What were you going to say, Doc?
Well, Rob, if it's okay, on that Date the Word app, we've got the verses for every date. But on my Date the Word app, I put together prayers to pray for your pastor. And so based on, Mike, what you're saying, I just want to throw this out to our listeners. If you will download the Date the Word app or go to my website, there is a guide for how to pray for your pastor Monday through Sunday. So each day you're praying something for them so that when you get to church on Sunday, you have been praying for your pastor, for the power of God to be all over him, and now there's an anticipation. I wonder how God's going to work today. How is he going to speak to my life today? How will he speak in our church's life today? And if we can have people in the pew praying for the pastor in the pulpit, I believe we'll see one of the great revivals that we've heard about in the past, but we desire to see now in our future.
And I'm sure you've
Date
experienced.
The Word has how to pray.
I'm sure you've experienced this too, Doc, that, like me, prior to having a church that I'm pastoring, I spoke at churches all over, a lot of different churches. And you can almost tell by the download that God gave you for this week's sermon, the prayers of the people that are praying for you. There's certain churches I would know if I was going there, God was going to give me something unbelievable. And there's other ones I better be, digging deep because I wouldn't feel the same enlightenment. That those prayers I'm 100% convinced where the pastor is getting, hopefully what he's delivering comes from God. And hopefully, as you guys pray, you have no idea. You may have a lot better idea than I do, but I was shocked as I experienced it more and more. And I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, Doc.
Yes. I had so many different prayer warriors when I was preaching at Liberty. And I'm telling you that there's just something about having other men and women who are lifting you up in prayer. Charles Spurgeon had people in the basement praying while he was preaching. You talk about an anointing, that's where it comes from. And Mike, I so appreciate you talking about this, that we're talking, if people are showing up at church having prayed, oh God, I want to see you at work today, that's going to bring about a different mindset. It's just like showing up to see a baseball game or a football game where your team has prepared. You're anticipating great things happening today. I show up at church and who's going to be saved today? Whose lives are going to be radically changed today?
Speaking of somebody being inspired, we were praying before the show that you would call if you haven't called yet. And so we're hoping you're going to call with that you should be calling. 866-348-7884. We want to see the answer to our prayers with your calls. 866-348-7884. We'll be right back. Thanks, Mike.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today's question. Well, actually, we'll just start off with it's 50 days. How fun is that? 50 days till our 250th birthday, the 4th of July celebration that's coming up. So many amazing events. We covered this Sunday on the 17th. There's a gigantic event going on in Washington, D.C. I hope your church are planning to attend that with Jay Strack. And then there's 50 days of prayer.
Robby,
yeah, go ahead.
They can watch it on the Trinity Broadcast Network. So you might be in Florida, you might be in Utah. You don't have to come to D.C. You can watch it on the Trinity Broadcast Network, TBN. So go there Sunday, and you'll be able to hear the different ones preaching. Jack Graham from Prestonwood will be preaching. Jonathan Falwell from Thomas Road Baptist Church will be one of the preachers. And it's going to be a glorious day.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you can see it live, by all means, there on that mall, on the National Mall, one of the great memories that God gave me was to be there that day of the Million Man March and worshiping God with all those people at the same time. It was an experience of corporate worship I never seen the likes of as we had that day. But that's one of the ways that you can certainly celebrate it. And another way clearly is taking part in this 50 days of prayer. The question we're asking you today, and I really am excited about the call that I know is waiting on us, that asks not, how America can become more Christian, but how can I make America more Christ-like? What does that look like practically? How have you experienced that, or what will you look forward to in the next 50 days of being able to do? And I like what Mike said a lot in so many different ways, is just being friendly. And for me personally, it's just something I've always done, and I'm indiscriminate on who I talk about, but every single day God gives me something amazing in the Scriptures. He does every day. And I can't even think about leaving the house until He's given it to me. And then I am waiting to share that with whoever I run into. And sometimes there are people like Doc that he knows I'll share it with him. Or I'll share it with, the waitress or whoever I run into, is just being friendly. Like, look what God showed me, because, once you've been taught, then you've got an opportunity to teach. And so I know for me in this 50 days that it's always amazing what God gives me. And like all things, if you give it to God, He will multiply it, right?
Yeah, it's like the fish and the loaves. Give it to God, watch Him multiply.
And right, He gave it to you. It's a partnership deal there. And so you give it back to Him and watch what He does with it. And it has amazed me for years and years and years, the way that He used His message, what He taught me, to affect people's lives. And I'll hear about it years later, and it's just like, man, God, how awesome is that? Because He's preparing those things in advance for you. And I know you're sitting out there, I've experienced that. This is what well, that's why you're supposed to call, so you can share with somebody else, could be able to take that experience and grow on that. So 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. We talked about how you can just ask somebody their birthday, and with the Date the Word app, you're next thing you know, you're having an amazing, I've seen it so many times firsthand, an amazing conversation around God's Word and connecting them to the Scriptures, as Doc did with that young lady who hadn't had a chance to study the Scriptures, and maybe whet their appetites for that. But what's some other ideas, Doc, you're thinking about?
Well, if we look at Scripture on coming to an event like what we have here, July the 4th, 2026, Isaiah 51:1. If I was going to preach one message around the 4th of July, it would come from Isaiah 51:1. Listen to me, you who follow after righteousness, you who seek the Lord. All right, that's us. Look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the hole of the pit from which you were dug. Look back to where you came from. Look at what brought you to this place. Look back and see the sacrifices and hear the dedication. And that's why I would recommend, again, watch A Great Awakening. You can get it on Prime, Netflix. This movie will help you see the history that was taking place, that brought about our Constitution. When they go to pray every morning at Congress, this movie shows how that happened with Ben Franklin. This idea of a liberty, of being a person who has been set free from sin, is to help other people be set free from sin. So I so love A Great Awakening. And I bet you know this, Robbie, but one of the signers of the Declaration, he inspired something that happens every 4th of July called fireworks.
I'm excited.
Who was that signer, Robbie?
Oh, he must have been a firecracker, is all I'm saying.
He was a firecracker from Boston, John Adams.
Really?
John Adams, who would go on to be the second president. John Adams wrote to his wife, And the thought was at that point that really the birthday was July the 2nd, but ultimately it became July the 4th because that's when everything got finalized. But he believed on the day that they said that they were going to do the vote, July the 2nd, would be celebrated. And one of the ways it would be celebrated is with parades and with bonfires and with fireworks. So one of the things everybody should be doing on the 4th of July is enjoying a great fireworks. And that should remind them then of John Adams, who was a great patriot that brought about this Declaration of Independence.
You know, another thing about that story that you just told, which I think is so beautiful, it's just amazing, really, a part of a history that I don't want to overlook, is that so much of those things that we know about that time happened as a result of the letters that John Adams wrote to his wife.
Yes, Abigail, yes.
In other words, that love and that devotion of a real union, right, of a great man. But you can see that there was a gigantic foundation of that great man that happened with his wife, who was named after a pretty godly woman herself, right? Abigail. And
yep.
I just think that's not a piece of history we need to miss. Like, man, how much of times have you heard things quoted from letters that John, Adams wrote to his wife? And same thing, George Washington wrote letters to his wife. And so many of those letters that were kept have given us such personal insight into intimate details of history that really tells you about the heart of the people that actually came from those letters. I think it's amazing.
Well, one of the things I would suggest to our listeners is with their children, grandchildren at some point, read the Declaration of Independence. And then go to a place as you get close to the 4th of July, maybe on the 4th. We took our kids when we lived just outside of Lynchburg. We went to what was called Poplar Forest. That's one of the homes of Thomas Jefferson. And they would have a reenactor there. Anytime they had the Thomas Jefferson reenactor, we wanted to go because he read the Declaration of Independence. And people need to read that and then understand one of the reasons that they were so diligent, they didn't want to violate Romans 13 because they still wanted to respect the king, but they needed to give reasons why we could no longer still be part of a king who is so wicked. And it's worth reading. You ought to read the Declaration of Independence as we go into this 250th celebration of the Declaration of Independence. Just a thought.
Oh, I love that. And again, one of the neat things is patriotism. Is, a lot of people died, all these amazing people through all these conflicts that we would have the liberty, and I'm not saying freedom. Liberty is a lot different word, and a beautiful Bible study of why it's liberty that Jesus would proclaim to the captives. He doesn't proclaim freedom, as it's mentioned in both Luke and Isaiah. He proclaims liberty to the captives, and so our forefathers picked up on that word, liberty, as you talked about, Abraham Clark, making sure that all our coins have that word, because we realize that we do answer to God. And that, we were given these liberties, but these liberties are still under the authority of the Father and in a partnership with God. And it's a beautiful thing that they clarify things so beautifully in the scriptures for us, and that our forefathers understood them in a way that they would pass them down to us, Doc. This has been fun. Tomorrow will be 49 days, so it's a whole new ballgame.
Yes. The countdown is on.
Well, there you go.
We need to make the most of these 50 days, praying for our nation and becoming a better people for our nation, for our God.
Absolutely beautiful.